Kia ora koutou e tātou e hoa ma. Thank you, Rachel, for that. My name is Tim Driver. So, like my colleague Micah Gunter that you've just heard from, I work at the AERU, the Agribusiness and Economics Research Unit at Lincoln University. And today I'm going to be presenting on the same series of surveys as Micah, so the 2015 and 2019 and 20 surveys, but discussing a different part of that research. So specifically looking at the use of digital media and smart technology for food and beverage information gathering and purchasing in markets that are relevant for New Zealand exporters. Cool. All right, so to start off with, New Zealand is a relatively geographically isolated country, and part of this means that New Zealand relies heavily on the export of its primary products for economic success, and this includes particularly food and beverages, which comprise a large amount of New Zealand's exports by value. So over time, there's been a shift in traditional trade partners with New Zealand from, say, having near exclusive access to the UK market to having new trade partners such as China and Japan within the last 50 years, particularly throughout as two very important trade partners. At the same time, there's been a really rapid evolution in the use of consumer use of digital media and smart technology. So when I say that, I mean digital media is sort of digital media sources, so things such as social media or access to particular websites. And smart technology refers to the tools that you can use to access this information, such as smartphones and that sort of thing. This has meant that consumers have near constant access to food and beverage product information and purchasing opportunities, particularly via mobile devices. You're constantly walking around with something that has access to the net worth of human knowledge. This represents an opportunity for New Zealand's food and beverage exporters for market access, disseminating information, and also direct consumer sales opportunities. So I think this is something that's really important for New Zealand exporting firms to consider. Okay, so I'll just briefly run through the survey structure. Mike has already talked about that in her speech, in her presentations. If you're new to this, I'll just run it through it quickly. So in these surveys, we firstly asked about the importance of the key attributes, the top 10 key attributes. This was followed by a detailed query into the underpinning factors that Mike has talked about, so food safety, environmental condition, etc. The third part that we haven't talked about today is queries regarding participants' attitudes to New Zealand as a country, as well as their regular food and beverage shopping. But importantly, what I want to talk to you today is the questions that looked at attitudes and behaviours regarding a range of digital media and smart technology for food and beverage products, specifically for information gathering and product purchasing. So again, just a quick recap. Each of these surveys went to 1,000 consumers in China, Japan, and the UK. The first survey conducted in 2015 as part of our MER program. This is followed by 2 annual surveys in June 2019 and 20. This will be repeated in June 2021. Just a wee note there for those surveys. And we've screened out participants if they participated in grocery shopping less than once per month. Okay, so just a quick overview of the kind of questions that we asked within the digital media and smart technology section. First, we asked people to indicate a use of a range of digital media for food and beverage information gathering. This has included social media, food company web pages, food blogs, and forums. Asked about the percentage of online shopping use for food and beverage purchasing and purchasing other products, so products other than food and beverages. Also, their main reasons for shopping online for these products. As well as the use of a range of mobile apps and devices for these same purposes, so information gathering and purchasing. And finally, the use of smart technology for verifying product claims. So this is really feeds into what Micah was talking about before, and that the credence attributes of products, people need to trust those claims. They need to give credence to those because they can't directly experience them at the point of sale. So, first of all, we asked participants about the use of a range of different digital media sources for gathering food and beverage product information online. So first of all, we asked about the use of social media. And what we can see here is, this is on a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from never to all the time. You can see that 3 countries are listed on the left-hand side of the slide there for the 3 different years. And what we can see here is an overall much higher use by Chinese consumers for different digital media sources for gathering food and beverage information. And this is something that will play play out right through all of our results that Chinese consumers are generally incredibly savvy with their use of technology for food and beverage information and purchasing relative to Japanese and UK participants. And you can see, especially take note of the yellow bar there, that indicates responses that people never use these sources for these purposes. And you can see a real stark contrast here between Chinese, Japanese, and UK participants. So UK participants largely never use these sources for that purpose, whereas it's a sort of across the board for Japan and very frequent for China. Moving on to food company web pages, a similar trend emerges here in that there's much higher use by Chinese consumers. So significant amount of consumers in the often and all the time areas of those results. And again, this pattern just keeps appearing that Chinese consumers generally use a wider range of information sources for food and beverage information. And again, for food blogs, much higher use than other countries. This is actually consistent with previous research as well, that blogs are highly influential on generating consumer sentiment towards food and beverage products in China. And finally, the use of forums. So you can see here that there's a very stark difference between the countries here. A large percentage of consumers in both Japan and the UK never use forums for this purpose, and this is generally decreasing over time, whereas it's remained fairly consistently high in China. Okay, we also asked participants to indicate the percentage of their usual shopping for food and beverage products and other products that they carry out online. And this slide is particularly telling of the narrative that Chinese consumers are much more savvy with these things, because you can see there's clearly a much higher use of online shopping for food and beverages by Chinese consumers. And this really is increasing for all countries over time, which is incredibly assuring for New Zealand's exporters. Particularly China, though, it's a very large amount. And relative to other products as well, you can see that shopping for other products in these markets has remained relatively mixed over time. The only increase has been in the UK. The rest of them have kind of been up and down. We also asked participants to indicate the main reasons that they used online shopping for food and beverages. And this was really interesting to see, that, again, this difference between China and Japan and the UK. So for the reason that prices are generally lower through online sales vehicles, you can see that across all countries there's been a decrease over time. So that is quite a surprising finding for us, because previous research has indicated that access to lower priced goods is a really important determinant of the use of online shopping for many countries. And you can see that that's decreasing over time. But when you compare that with the next slide, the main reason being the quality of food and beverage products is better online, you can see an incredibly large increase, and particularly for China, well, only for China really, and it suggests that the importance for Chinese consumers has been a shift from low price to high quality via online vehicles. But you can see that the quality of products is not perceived to be better online by either Japanese or UK participants. Very low rating. So you're probably wondering, what do these consumers actually want from online shopping? And that will be detailed in this next slide. Is the convenience of having products delivered to their homes. This is significantly higher for Japan and the UK, much more so than other countries. Although you can see that there is a stark drop-off, particularly in the UK, the importance of home delivery between 2015 and 2019. And that could be attributed in part to the rise of click and collect services, where you don't actually have to walk around the supermarket. You can just collect your shopping from a particular point, and that will help to achieve some of the convenience that was previously used from home delivery. We also asked participants to indicate their use of a range of different smart technology, primarily the use of smartphones. And again, as I alluded to in my introduction, this is because this is an incredibly convenient technology which is constantly accessing information and purchasing opportunities online. So we're very intrigued by that. So for this question, have you ever used a mobile app to find out more about a food and beverage product? And again, you can see that there's clearly much higher use by Chinese participants in this case, further signaling just how technologically savvy Chinese consumers are in the food and beverage space. But I wouldn't write off the Japanese and UK responses either, because you could see that we've got steady growth over time, especially between 2019 and 2020. This could be partially attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that there's been evidence that people in consumers in pretty much every country in the world has shifted from brick and mortar retail for food and beverages to online mechanisms, and that is also something that will play out in the other results. Following this, we asked participants to indicate if they use their mobile device to purchase food and beverages. And again, the same thing is happening here. Chinese consumers are much more technologically savvy in terms of food and beverage purchasing with their mobile device. However, you can see that there's a little bit of a drop-off in Chinese use of mobile devices for food purchasing between 2019 and 2020. And this could be down to a few different things. One of it could be a slight ambiguity in Chinese participants' understanding of this question, because mobile payment systems are so prevalent at brick and mortar retail throughout China that it could be an understanding that this question was, do you use your mobile device to pay for food and beverages? In which case that would explain the drop-off in the 2019 and 2020, because 2020 obviously large shift from brick and mortar retail purchasing for food and beverages to online mechanisms, so there'd be less use of mobile devices for purchasing. Again, we asked participants if they'd ever use their mobile device in conjunction with barcodes or QR codes on, presumably on product packaging or in-store presentations for finding information about food and beverage products or purchasing food and beverage products. And interesting here, you can see again, China has much higher use across all of the surveyed countries. And lesser use for Japan and the UK, but increasing use of these things in Japan and the UK for the purpose of finding food and beverage information, whereas for the purpose of purchasing food and beverages, results have remained fairly mixed. So that suggests growth in their use for finding information. Cool. And finally, we asked participants to indicate the use of a range of different technologies for verifying product credentials. So again, this is what Michael was talking about before, the idea that credence attributes are required to be trusted by consumers in order to understand, to get the full value from those attributes. And again, you can see much higher use by Chinese consumers and much less use by Japan and the UK. Pay particular note here to the UK results, and you see that particularly the never in yellow on this slide, you see a very low use of these things. However, when we asked participants to indicate if they would use these things if they were available to verify product credentials, here's what happened. So you can see that there's a clear interest on the part of UK participants for using QR codes to verify product claims and credentials. I'm just going to move between these two slides one more time so you can see that change. So where other countries remained relatively the same between the survey years, UK showed a clear difference in their current use and intended use. So finally, taking this all together, what does this mean for New Zealand's primary product exports? So I think fairly obviously from these results, and probably not a surprise to many people here, that Chinese consumers are incredibly and increasingly sophisticated with the use of a range of digital media sources and smart technology in the food and beverage space. So this suggests that if you have a digital strategy going into China, that you're going to have much more immediate success in that market relative to Japanese and UK markets. In particular, Chinese consumers use digital media for accessing information about food and beverage products. So this is an opportunity for New Zealand exporters to have a presence in these platforms and to generate positive electronic word of mouth and really get some positive sentiment for their products. There's also, as I showed in the last couple of slides, a very strong interest on the part of UK consumers for technologies that verify food and beverage product credentials. And this is something that's worth looking into for New Zealand exporters. And finally, what we've seen overall is that exporters may need to customize their approach for target markets. It may not be good enough to have a blanket marketing and digital strategy. It needs to be customized for each of the markets that you're entering into. Okay, as Micah mentioned, you could find more results like these for a range of different products, different types of technology use across a range of different markets on our online tool. But thank you very much for listening. Cheers.